Strange day, son.
You're telling me.
Star Trek Picard Season 3 Episode 8 is getting serious as the mystery of Jack Crusher just keeps getting weirder. But in addition to all this phaser fire and mayhem, the big news about this episode is that this is the first time since 2002 that all of the Next Generation crew have been together in the same room on screen. That's right, it's been over 20 years since we've seen this beautiful sight.
It was 20 years ago today.
Welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 8, Surrender. The episode opens with a first for Star Trek cinematography as we pull back from a reflection in a window on top of the bridge. Vadic is lighting one of her cigarettes, even though in The Wrath of Khan we learned that there was really no smoking on the bridge of a starship. Early in the episode, Jack uses his body jumping abilities, which is a relatively uncommon superpower in Star Trek canon, although we did see some similar body surfing in the Voyager episode Vis-a-Vis, not to mention the evil Rajak alien spirit jumping into people's bodies in the TOS classic Wolf in the Fold. That said, Jack's abilities to jump into other people's bodies is a bit like what happens in every episode of Quantum Leap.
Hey, what would happen if Sam leaped into the body of Captain Archer in Enterprise?
Well, that can happen because they're both Scott Bakula, and that is a different show in a different universe.
Would that leap be like a long way getting from here to there?
It's been a long time.
Okay, high five. As Vadic holds the Titan hostage, we get a good dose of the classic TOS bridge sound effects, which is appropriate because Vadic's threats to the crew are very reminiscent of Khan.
Oh, alright, okay, so we got more Wrath of Khan references.
No, actually, these Khan references feel much closer to Khan's first appearance in the TOS episode Space Seed. Here, Vadic threatens to deprive the crew of oxygen or gravity with the tap of her finger, which is a lot like Khan threatening the crew of the Enterprise with the same kind of environmental manipulation when he took over the ship in Space Seed.
I have shut off the life support system to your bridge, jammed up your exit routes.
Vadic also threatens to make it snow in the crew mess.
A crew mess. Snow with cold.
This is the kind of thing that happened before in Star Trek, specifically the animated series episode The Practical Joker, in which the Enterprise computer went haywire and made it snow in the recreation room. Over on the Shrike, Will and Deanna are talking about Betazoid words, and Will calls her
Imzadi,
which means beloved in the Betazoid language, which we learned way back in the first episode of TNG.
Do you remember what I taught you, Imzadi?
Troy and Riker talk about the death of their son, Thad, which happened in the years before Picard Season 1, and was referenced earlier in this season in the episode 17 Seconds. Troy says that the Changelings came to the Riker home on Nepenthe, pretending to be Will, and she jokes that the Changeling was
Good in bed, bad at pizza.
The pizza remark references Riker making pizza for his family and Picard and Soji in the Season 1 episode Nepenthe. Troy wonders if they should have given the Changelings a compromise code, and Riker says, confidently,
right now he's set a classic Captain Picard trap, and as we speak, he's got her on the ropes.
And of course, we cut back to the Titan, and Vadic is very much not on the ropes, which seems to be a nod to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, in which Indy says,
with any luck, he's got the grill already.
Does anyone here speak English?
As Vadic threatens to kill hostages, Jack uses his special powers to take control of the body of Lieutenant Matthew Arliss Mira and punches Picard's codex, which we later see as security override 1211 Picard Alpha Tango 75. This is slightly different from Picard's other commonly used password, Picard 47 Alpha Tango.
Authorization Picard 47 Alpha Tango.
Vadic's sick game of trying to make the crew guess which person she's going to execute feels similar to what happened in The Search for Spock, when Krug ordered the execution of either Spock, Saavik, or David, and even though the audience thought the Klingons were for sure going to kill Saavik, David died instead. Here, everyone's favorite new Vulcan officer, Tavine, is tragically blasted by Vadic. Back on the Shrike, Riker and Troy worry that
Kestra will have lost everyone.
Now this references their daughter, who was about 14 in Season 1, so she's probably close to 17 now.
Jeez, where is Kestra, by the way?
Well, Kestra is safe because, according to showrunner Terry Matalas, Kestra is already in an early admission program at Starfleet Academy. Troy and Riker argue over the fact that Troy used her Betazoid powers to dull the grief in Will's mind when Thad died. This is something that we didn't know in Season 1, which leads to a new revelation, that neither Will nor Deanna actually like living on Nepenthe, and that they were mostly there for Thad's health, but that Deanna thinks that their cabin in the woods was too much, saying,
That house, it's like it was designed by a cabal of retro prairie hipsters.
Troy mentions that she misses city life, specifically Raktajino lattes. Raktajino is a type of Klingon coffee first mentioned in the DS9 episode Dax.
Another Raktajino.
Interestingly, the episode Dax was co-written by Star Trek legend DC Fontana, who wrote for TOS and TNG, and this was the last Star Trek script that she ever worked on. Troy saying that she wants to live in a city actually checks out with Voyager canon. In the Voyager episode Pathfinder, Troy visits Barclay at his apartment in a major city on Earth. Did Troy live in the same city City around the same time? Could be. Now, before we figure out which future Star Trek city has the best coffee, Worf busts in and we hear cues from Jerry Goldsmith's Klingon theme as well as Goldsmith's score from First Contact. Worf vaguely references his brief romance with Troy, saying that he has
counted the days since I last saw you.
Bruh. Worf and Troy briefly dated in TNG after the events of the Season 7 episode Parallels.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
We don't really talk about that, no. Worf was also, of course, married to Jadzia Dax in DS9, and then she was brutally killed by a Pa-wraith in the DS9 episode Tears of the Prophets. Because of the glowing red stuff in Jack's eyes, many fans have wondered if the Pa-wraiths are back in Picard Season 3. And later in the episode, when Deanna says that the presence inside of Jack is
a voice inside him, ancient and weak.
That could also maybe suggest that the Pa-wraiths are back, baby.
Surprise, bitch. I bet you thought you'd seen the last of me.
Worf and Raffi have a cloak shuttle called the Emerson nearby, which also has a cloaking device. Meanwhile, back on the Titan, the LaForges and the Crusher Picards all realize that the key to retaking the ship lies with Data. But first, in order to prove to Geordi that he's not a shapeshifter, Geordi has to say that Picard brought a bottle of wine to his anniversary dinner on Rigel, and the Picard says,
A Chateau Picard Bordeaux, which you said was too dry because your taste in wine is pedestrian at best.
And this adds Geordi to the long list of people who have thrown shade at Picard's wine during this season, including Shaw, Jack, and Worf. Might also be a little bit of shade to just how much time we spend on that vineyard in Season 1. Jack refers to Data as Geordi's robot friend, which is funny because although Data is technically an android and not a robot, and this Data is a synthetic human android, Geordi does reference some very, very, very deep robot lore here. When Picard asks Geordi if Data's personality can just destroy lore, Geordi responds that
Data's ethical subroutines don't permit him to take a life of any kind.
The idea that Data has ethical subroutines that prevent him from committing murder is connected to the writings of Isaac Asimov, specifically the laws of robotics from the book I, Robot, among many others. In Data lore, it is heavily implied that Asimov's laws of robotics are literally programmed into Data. As Data and Lore fight for dominance in Data's Mindscape, we see Data's Sherlock Holmes hat from the TNG episode Season 2, Elementary Dear Data, as well as the pipe, which Data first busted out in the Season 1 episode Lonely Among Us.
Indubitably, my good woman.
We also hear dialogue between Geordi and Data taken from Elementary Dear Data, specifically these lines.
So you say everything in here has some significance?
Holmes collected nothing, neither trinkets nor thoughts which were not specifically significant to him.
The idea that Data or Holmes would only collect thoughts that were specifically significant to him foreshadows Data's eventual defeat of Lore, but also it's an Easter egg for Sherlock Holmes stories specifically. In the very first Holmes novel, A Study in Scarlet, Holmes tells Watson that he organizes his mind very specifically to avoid clutter, and that everything in his mind is there for a reason. So, when Lore says,
Evolution, my dear Watson.
Although he's mocking Data, he's actually taking on the memories that Data wants him to incorporate. Other memories Data gives to Lore include an older style TNG tricorder, a deck of playing cards to remind us of all those poker games in TNG.
When I play poker with my shipmates, it often appears to be a useful forum for exploring the different facets of humanity.
Data also gives up his hologram of Tasha Yar. This hologram comes from the TNG episode Skin of Evil, in which Tasha died, but it was seen more prominently in The Measure of a Man, in which Picard uses Data's sentimentality about Tasha to prove that Data is more than just a machine.
She was special to me, sir.
And of course, Data's attachment to Tasha is connected to the TNG Season 1 romp, The Naked Now, in which Tasha and Data slept together and we learned that Data was
fully functional, aren't you?
Of course, but
How fully?
in every way, of course.
But Data's ultimate defeat of Lore is all thanks to the love of a very special cat. When Data gives Lore the memory of Spot, we see the little guy, and Data says that Spot
taught me to love. He is the best of me, the last of me.
Spot first appeared in the TNG episode Data's Day, and Data's biggest emotional moment with the cat happened when he discovered that Spot had not been killed in the crash of the Enterprise D saucer. Now, we last saw Spot in Nemesis, which seems to indicate that by now, in 2401, Spot's probably passed away.
I am happy to see Spot, yet I am crying.
But a deleted scene from Nemesis revealed that Worf was left to take care of Spot following Data's first death. Do you guys remember Data's poem about Spot?
Oh, Spot. The complex levels of behavior you display connote a fairly well-developed cognitive array.
I own a t-shirt with the poem on it. As Data overpowers Lore with his nice personality, he embraces his evil brother, which feels like another shout out to the TOS banger The Enemy Within, in which Kirk has to hug it out with his evil self and become whole again. As Data retakes the Titan's computer systems, Jack has gone full Return of the Jedi against Vadic, holding what seems to be a bomb to destroy her and him.
because he's holding a thermal detonator.
But Jack doesn't have a bomb, it's a force field which he uses to protect himself and Seven as Picard orders the evacuation hatch blown. This leads Vadic to be sucked out through what used to be the view screen part of the bridge and into space. She also gets perhaps the greatest all-time dying line of any Star Trek villain ever, when she simply says, "Solid." Seven orders full photon torpedoes on the Shrike, giving Kirk, Picard, Sulu, Janeway, and every single other Star Trek captain a run for their money with the way she says, "Fire."
Fire. Fire.
Fire! As Geordi and Data tidy up the ship's systems, Data says,
I believe we're good here.
Geordi is shocked that Data used a contraction. Now back in Data lore, it was established that Data could not use contractions.
I use their contractions. For example, I say, can't, or isn't, and you say, cannot, and is not.
And in the episode Future Imperfect, Riker knew that he was trapped inside of a fake simulation because Data used contractions.
I said I cannot operate.
No, that's not what you said. You said I can't. You used a contraction, didn't you?
But the new Data is different.
Yes, he is.
Isn't it weird that he looks so much older?
Bro, it's Star Trek. It's supposed to be fun and goofy. Just go with it.
Maxon Ries Blajblanarnik Karnik.
Geordi and Data talked about their friendship, and Data tells him that even though he's changed a lot,
The one thing that will remain forever constant is my gratitude for your friendship.
this feels very similar to what Spock said about his friendship with Kirk in
The Wrath of Khan?
Yes, that's right, in The Wrath of Khan, when Spock said,
I have been, and always shall be, your friend.
When Geordi and Data join the rest of the crew for a traditional TNG conference, Picard worries that they betrayed Data's wishes by bringing him back to life. This references the death of Data's consciousness in Picard Season 1, which the new Data refers to as that me, making the clear statement that this is a different version of Data.
I know that me is resting peacefully.
As the crew gets down to business, we see a Frontier Day graphic behind them and we hear the famous Jerry Goldsmith TNG theme, which was, of course, first composed for Star Trek The Motion Picture back in 1979. As the crew gets over how great it is for all of them to be back together, Troy points out that the darkness associated with Jack is not in him, but around him and passes through him. Looking straight at Picard and Crusher, Troy says that she has to meet Jack and figure out what's behind that red door once and for all. As the Titan cloaks, Troy guides Jack into his darkest visions and says that they will go through that red door together. Now we still don't know what the red door is, but whatever we think it is, we should probably be ready to be wrong. And Terry Metalis' 12 Monkeys, an ongoing mystery about the Red Forest, pervaded much of the show's narrative. But in that show, once we learned what certain lines of dialogue meant and what the Red Forest really was, it wasn't even close to what it seemed like it might be. So sure, we've got a lot of fan theories about the Red Door, but at this point, the most unlikely fan theory is probably the correct one.
If you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.